Sometimes the smallest act of kindness happens when nobody is watching. Unfortunately for Maya Foster, someone was. Rain slid down the narrow Brooklyn alley in silver sheets, turning broken pavement into mirrors of neon light. The city was winding down for the night. Storefronts were dark, traffic had thinned. Most people hurried past with their heads down, eager to get home before the storm grew worse. Maya wasn't one of them. At 28, she had spent the last 10 hours helping animals at a small veterinary clinic a few blocks away. Her sneakers were soaked, her grey jacket clung to her shoulders, a canvas tote bag bumped against her hip with every step. She should have been heading home. Instead, she stopped. A faint whimper drifted through the sound of rain. Not loud, barely noticeable, the kind of sound most people would miss completely. Maya froze. She listened. There it was again, a weak cry from somewhere behind a row of overflowing trash bins. She stepped into the alley without hesitation. The smell of wet concrete and damp cardboard filled the air. Her phone flashlight swept across the shadows until she found the source. A stray dog curled against a brick wall, medium-sized, thin. Dirty white fur streaked with mud, one front paw tucked awkwardly beneath its body. The animal lifted its head when it saw her. Fear flickered in its tired brown eyes. Maya slowly crouched. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "It's okay." The dog didn't move. Rain dripped from its ears. Its body trembled from cold and exhaustion. Maya carefully set down her bag. Years of working with frightened animals had taught her patience. No sudden movements, no pressure. Just calm, just trust. She reached into her tote and pulled out a small emergency kit she always carried. Gauze, bandages, antiseptic wipes, the basics. She examined the paw. Nothing serious. A deep scrape, painful but treatable. The dog flinched when she touched it. "I know," she whispered. "I know it hurts." The city disappeared around her. The storm disappeared. For several minutes there was only a woman kneeling in the rain and a frightened animal that needed help. Less than half a mile away, another vehicle turned onto the street. A black SUV moved through the wet darkness with silent precision. It slowed as it approached the intersection. The driver glanced toward the alley, then immediately looked again. Inside the back seat sat Rafael Marino, 35 years old, impeccably dressed despite the weather. His attention rarely lingered on anything outside the business waiting for him downtown. Tonight was different. Through the rain-streaked window, he noticed a figure kneeling alone in the alley. Most people ignored suffering when it inconvenienced them, especially in New York, especially on a stormy Tuesday night. Yet this woman remained there, soaked to the bone, carefully wrapping a bandage around the paw of a stray dog nobody would ever thank her for saving. The driver waited for instructions. None came. The SUV remained parked at the curb. Back in the alley, Maya secured the final strip of gauze. The dog blinked at her. Then, cautiously, it licked her wrist. A tired smile appeared on her face. She opened a packet of treats from her bag and placed them on the ground. The dog devoured them immediately. Hunger moved faster than fear. Maya checked her watch. Nearly 9:30, she sighed. "Okay. Now, I really have to go." The dog looked at her as if considering whether to follow. Maya stood and adjusted her bag. For a second she glanced toward the street. Something felt strange. Not dangerous exactly, just unusual. The sensation that someone was watching. She scanned the road, a few parked empty sidewalks. Rain, nothing else. The feeling faded. She shook her head and continued walking. The dog remained behind, at least for the moment. Inside the SUV, Raphael kept his eyes fixed on the retreating figure. "Sir?" the driver finally asked. Raphael didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the dog sitting beneath the alley light, then back to the woman disappearing around the corner. Something about the scene disturbed a part of him he preferred not to examine. A memory, a feeling, something buried years ago. "Follow her," he said quietly. The driver glanced into the mirror. "Excuse me?" Raphael never repeated himself. Yet tonight he did. "Follow her." The SUV pulled away from the curb. Several blocks ahead, Maya walked through the rain unaware of the vehicle, now moving at a distance behind her. She passed closed bakeries, a laundromat glowing blue beneath fluorescent lights, a pharmacy preparing to lock its doors. Her apartment was only another 10 minutes away. She had no reason to look back, no reason to suspect that a man who commanded fear throughout the city had postponed an entire evening simply because he had witnessed a stranger show kindness to a wounded dog. Unfortunately for Maya Foster, the black SUV kept following, and before the night was over, it still hadn't left. The next morning arrived, wrapped in pale sunlight and the distant hum of city traffic. Brooklyn looked different after a storm. Sidewalks glistened. Store owners swept puddles from their entrances. Coffee carts filled the air with the smell of roasted beans and warm pastries. Maya Foster pushed open the door of the veterinary clinic at 7:45 sharp, balancing a paper cup of coffee in one hand and her tote bag in the other. The bell above the door chimed softly. The reception desk, the barking from the kennels, the faint scent of disinfectant mixed with dog shampoo, normal, predictable, safe. Exactly what she needed after the strange feeling that had followed her home the night before. She had almost convinced herself. She imagined it. Almost 10 o'clock the clinic was busy. A golden retriever needed vaccinations. A nervous tabby cat refused to leave its carrier. An elderly couple brought in a beagle that had somehow swallowed part of a tennis ball. Maya moved through her routine with practiced confidence. Animals made sense. People were harder. People carried secrets. Animals usually carried nothing but trust. Around 11:15 the front door opened again. Maya barely looked up at first. She was organizing medication behind the counter when she heard the receptionist's voice change. Not nervous, not exactly, more surprised. The kind of tone people used when someone important unexpectedly walked into a room. Maya glanced toward the entrance, then froze. The man from the black SUV stood near the door. Tall, impeccably dressed, dark charcoal coat, calm expression. The kind of presence that somehow made the entire room feel smaller. For a second she wondered if she was mistaken. Maybe Brooklyn had more than one mysterious man driving luxury SUVs. Then their eyes met. No, it was him. He recognized her too. Maya immediately remembered the strange sensation from the previous night, the feeling of being watched, the feeling she had dismissed. The man approached the reception desk carrying 2 large bags. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I would like to make a donation," he replied. The faint trace of an accent shaped certain words, though Maya could not identify where it came from. "Donation?" the receptionist repeated. "Food, blankets, supplies." He placed the bags on the counter. "For the animals." Maya slowly stepped closer. Inside one bag she spotted premium dog food, expensive brands, the kind most shelters could not afford regularly. "That is incredibly generous," the receptionist said. "Thank you." The man nodded politely. Then his gaze shifted toward Maya again, not staring, just observing, the way someone studied a detail they found unexpectedly important. "You work here?" he asked. Maya crossed her arms lightly. "I do." "Then I suppose these supplies are in good hands." Something about the comment felt strangely personal. Maya did not know why. "Thank you," she said cautiously. "The animals will appreciate it." A faint smile touched his face. Small, brief, gone almost immediately. Before Maya could think of another response, movement near the entrance caught her attention. A familiar shape slipped through the partially opened door. Wet white fur, brown eyes, the stray dog from the alley. "Oh my goodness," Maya whispered. The dog trotted directly inside. The receptionist laughed. "Looks like somebody knows this place." Maya crouched immediately. The dog's tail wagged so hard its entire body swayed. "Hey, sweetheart." She checked the bandage. Still intact. The animal seemed far better than it had the night before. Healthier, more alert. Then something unexpected happened. The man spoke. "The paw looks much better." Maya looked up sharply. "How do you know about the paw?" For the first time, silence entered the conversation. Not awkward silence, dangerous silence, the kind that appeared when someone realized they had said more than they intended. The man glanced at the dog, then back at Maya. "You were helping him last night." Maya slowly stood. Her heartbeat quickened. "You saw that?" "Yes." Another pause, this one longer. The clinic noise seemed distant suddenly. Barking faded into the background. Phones rang somewhere behind the desk, yet Maya heard none of it clearly. The man finally answered. "I happened to be passing by," yet something felt incomplete, like a sentence missing its final words. Maya studied him carefully. Most people would not stop. Most people should. The response came immediately, honest, unrehearsed. For a moment neither of them looked away. Then the dog nudged Maya's leg, breaking the tension. The receptionist called for assistance in exam room 3. The spell dissolved. Maya stepped back. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "thank you for the donation." "You are welcome." He turned toward the door. "Take care of him." Maya glanced down at the dog. "I will." The man gave a single nod and walked outside. Through the clinic window she watched him cross the street. A black SUV waited at the curb. The same vehicle from the night before, the same dark windows, the same unsettling presence. The passenger door opened. He stepped inside. The SUV pulled away. Maya stood motionless beside the window. Something about the encounter refused to settle in her mind. Then she looked down at the dog sleeping peacefully at her feet. A question lingered louder than all the others. If their meeting had truly been a coincidence, How had a complete stranger known the exact condition of an injured paw he should never have seen? Coincidences were easy to believe the first time, sometimes even the second, but by the end of the week Maya Foster was running out of explanations. Thursday afternoon painted Brooklyn in shades of gold and amber. Leaves drifted across crowded sidewalks. Delivery trucks rumbled through intersections. The city carried on with its usual restless rhythm, while Maya finished her shift at the clinic and headed toward a small cafe she visited almost every Thursday. It sat on a quiet corner 3 blocks from the animal shelter where she volunteered on weekends. The coffee was affordable, the owner knew her name, and the window seats overlooked one of her favorite streets in the neighborhood. It was the kind of place that felt untouched by time. Maya pushed open the door and was immediately greeted by the smell of cinnamon, espresso, and warm bread. The familiar comfort settled over her shoulders. She ordered her usual drink, claimed her favorite table near the front window, and opened a folder containing paperwork from the shelter's upcoming fundraiser. For nearly 20 minutes everything felt normal, peaceful. Then the bell above the door chimed. Maya looked up instinctively. Her stomach tightened. Rafael Marino stepped inside. He wore a dark navy coat instead of a suit today. His appearance seemed almost casual compared to the polished image she remembered. Almost, yet there was still something unmistakably different about him. Something that made people glance up when he entered a room. He noticed her immediately, not surprise, recognition, as though finding her there had simply confirmed something he already expected. Maya stared for a second longer than she intended. Raphael approached the counter, ordered black coffee, and thanked the barista with quiet politeness. Then he turned. Their eyes met again. Maya, the fact that he knew her name made her blink. "You know my name?" she asked before she could stop herself. A brief silence followed. Not long enough to feel uncomfortable. The clinic receptionist mentioned it. His answer sounded reasonable, maybe too reasonable. Maya could not remember hearing anyone introduce her. Raphael gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Every instinct told her she should say no. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Sure." Raphael sat down. Outside, sunlight reflected off passing cars. Inside, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversations and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Raphael glanced at the paperwork spread across the table. "Fundraiser?" Maya nodded. "Animal shelter. You spend a lot of time helping animals. Someone should." A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "That sounds familiar." Maya narrowed her eyes slightly. "You say that like it is unusual. These days it is." She studied him. The answer felt honest. Too honest. Like someone speaking from experience rather than opinion. The barista delivered his coffee. Raphael thanked her again. Small details continued to surprise Maya. Powerful men in expensive cars were not usually known for remembering names or saying thank you twice, at least not the ones she had met. "So what do you do?" Maya finally asked. Raphael lifted the cup slowly. "Business." She laughed softly. That is the most suspicious answer possible. To her surprise, he laughed too. The sound was brief but genuine. "Then perhaps I should work on my answers, perhaps." For the first time since meeting him, the tension eased slightly, not completely. Just enough to allow curiosity room to grow. They talked for another 15 minutes. About Brooklyn, about rescue animals, about the challenges of keeping shelters funded. Raphael listened more than he spoke. Whenever Maya mentioned a specific problem, he seemed genuinely interested. Yet every time the conversation drifted toward his personal life, he redirected it with remarkable skill. The result left Maya with the strange feeling that she had spent 20 minutes learning almost nothing about him at all. Eventually her phone buzzed, requesting help with an upcoming adoption event. Maya gathered her papers and stood. "I should go." Raphael rose as well, of course. She slid her folder into her bag. Then something occurred to her. "Actually, there is something I have been wondering." Raphael waited. "The clinic, the alley, and now this." She looked directly at him. "Do you usually show up wherever I happen to be?" For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. Not fear, not irritation, just surprise. Then it vanished. "Brooklyn is not that large." It was a clever answer. Not an answer, really. More like a door politely closing before she could see what was behind it. Maya smiled despite herself. That was not a real explanation. "No," Raphael admitted quietly. It was not. She shook her head and headed toward the exit. Outside, afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the sidewalk. Maya took only a few steps before her phone rang again. She answered while walking, listening to details about volunteer schedules and supply donations. When the call ended, she glanced through the cafe window one last time. Raphael was still sitting at the table, watching, Not in a threatening way, not even in a romantic way. More like a man trying to solve a puzzle he could not stop thinking about. Maya turned away and continued down the street. Unfortunately for her, she never noticed the folder sticking halfway out of her bag. Nor did she notice the single sheet of paper that slipped free, drifted onto the sidewalk, and revealed the exact dates and locations of every volunteer shift she planned to work for the next month. Some people enter your life loudly. Others arrive like shadows, noticeable only when you finally realize they have been there all along. Friday evening settled over Brooklyn beneath a ceiling of low gray clouds. The rush hour crowds poured through sidewalks and subway entrances like rivers of moving coats and umbrellas. Maya Foster adjusted the strap of her tote bag and descended the concrete into the station. It had been a long day. 2 emergency appointments had pushed her shift late. Her feet ached. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. All she wanted was a hot shower and a quiet evening with the stray dog that had somehow become a regular visitor outside her apartment building. The station platform was crowded but restless. Commuters checked their phones. A musician played a tired saxophone near a support column. The smell of rain and steel hung in the air. Maya stepped closer to the yellow safety line and glanced down the tunnel. The next train was still 6 minutes away. She sighed softly. Around her, conversations blended into background noise. Then she noticed him, a man standing 20 feet away, not doing anything wrong, not speaking, just watching. At first Maya ignored it. New York was full of strange people. 10 seconds later she looked again. He was still there. Same position, same attention. A knot formed in her stomach. She shifted farther down the platform. The man moved too, not immediately, not obviously, just enough to make the coincidence feel uncomfortable. Maya told herself not to overreact. The train would arrive soon. Everything would be fine. Unfortunately for her, the next train announcement crackled through the speakers with bad news. Mechanical delays, additional wait time. Groans spread through the platform. People checked their watches. Maya checked hers too. 8 more minutes. When she looked up again, the man had moved closer, not close enough to speak, close enough to notice. Maya's grip tightened around her bag. She turned and headed toward a brighter section of the station where more commuters were gathered. The man remained behind. For a moment she felt foolish. Maybe she had imagined the entire thing. Then she heard footsteps, slow, consistent, following the exact path she had taken. Her pulse quickened. She did not look back immediately. She crossed toward another cluster of passengers. The footsteps continued. Closer now. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her. Maya froze. She turned carefully. The same man stood there, mid-30s, average height, forgettable face. Yet something about the smile made her uncomfortable. "Can I help you?" Maya asked politely. "I have seen you around." The smile widened. "I thought maybe we could talk." Maya took a small step backward. "Maybe after your train." "No, thank you." She expected the conversation to end there. Most people would understand. Instead, the man remained where he was, still smiling, still watching. The station suddenly felt much larger and much emptier despite the crowd surrounding her. Maya moved away again. This time she did not stop until she reached the staircase leading back toward street level. When she glanced over her shoulder, the man was no longer following. Relief washed through her. Maybe he had finally understood. Maybe she had worried for nothing. Unfortunately for Maya, she never saw what happened next. Less than a mile away, Rafael Marino should have ended 30 minutes earlier. His phone vibrated once. A single message. No greeting, no explanation, just a location. A subway station. Rafael read it silently, then stood. His associates immediately noticed the change in his expression. "Is everything all right?" one asked. Rafael slipped the phone into his pocket. "Cancel the rest." Back at the station, Maya emerged onto the street. Cool evening air greeted her. Traffic lights reflected across wet pavement. She glanced behind her one last time. The man from the platform never appeared. In fact, he seemed to have vanished completely. The uneasy feeling slowly faded. Maybe she had overreacted after all. Maybe the entire encounter had been harmless. She began walking toward her apartment. 4 blocks later, she noticed something strange. A black SUV sat parked across the street beneath a row of maple trees. Dark windows, familiar shape, familiar presence. Maya, the vehicle remained still. She could not see inside. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the engine started quietly. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. Maya stood motionless beneath the streetlights. A chill moved through her despite the mild evening air. Because for the first time since meeting Rafael Marino, she was no longer asking whether their encounters were coincidences. She was beginning to wonder how many times he had been nearby without her ever noticing. By Saturday afternoon, curiosity had become impossible for Maya Foster to ignore. The questions followed her through every part of the day, through morning appointments at the clinic, through lunch eaten too quickly behind the reception desk, through the endless paperwork waiting in neat stacks beside her computer. Every time she thought about the black SUV parked outside her apartment building, she found herself thinking about Rafael Marino. Every time she thought about Rafael Marino, she remembered the strange pattern that connected every recent encounter. None of it made sense, and yet none of it felt entirely accidental anymore. Shortly after 5 o'clock, Maya locked the clinic door and headed toward the animal shelter for the adoption event listed on her volunteer schedule. The air carried the crisp edge of approaching autumn. Children laughed in a nearby playground. Food trucks lined one side of the street. The neighborhood felt alive, normal, safe, exactly the kind of place where mysteries should not exist. The shelter occupied an old brick building tucked between a bookstore and a hardware store. Volunteers hurried between folding tables, while families wandered among rows of dogs waiting for new homes. Maya immediately threw herself into work. Questions could wait, animals could not. For nearly 2 hours she helped potential adopters, answered questions, cleaned kennels, and introduced dogs to visiting families. The familiar routine settled her nerves. Then a black luxury sedan rolled quietly to the curb outside. Maya saw it through the front window. Her stomach tightened instantly. A moment later the door opened. Rafael stepped inside. He did not the previous surprise to see her, almost as if he already knew she would be there. Maya folded her arms. "You have got to be kidding me." Rafael glanced toward her. A faint smile appeared. "Good evening, Maya. Do you own a map of Brooklyn with little pins marking my location?" His expression remained calm. "That seems unlikely, and yet here you are." "I am." The answer somehow made her more frustrated. Most people would deny it. Rafael simply acknowledged the obvious. Several volunteers nearby recognized him immediately. Maya noticed the subtle shift in the room, heads turning, conversations lowering, people suddenly standing a little straighter. She filed the observation away. Rafael approached one of the donation tables and spoke quietly with the shelter director. Within minutes paperwork appeared, signatures followed. The director's eyes widened visibly. Maya watched from across the room. When the conversation ended, the director practically floated back toward her. "You are not going to believe this. What happened?" "Anonymous sponsorship." Maya glanced toward Rafael. "Anonymous, enough funding to cover veterinary expenses for the next 6 months. Maya stared. 6 months? The director nodded enthusiastically. "Whoever he is, he just saved us from cancelling half our programs this winter." Across the room, Rafael was kneeling beside an elderly Labrador whose grey muzzle suggested many years of loyalty. The dog rested head against his hand without hesitation. Maya found herself unexpectedly surprised. Powerful businessmen were usually interested in publicity, cameras, recognition. Rafael seemed interested in none of those things. He stood and approached her again. "You look suspicious." "I am suspicious because of the donation, because people do not usually give away that kind of money and pretend it never happened." Rafael glanced toward the dogs. "Maybe some things are more important than being noticed." The Mayas did not know how to respond. Outside, sunlight faded into gold. Families continued visiting adoption booths. Somewhere near the entrance, a child laughed as a puppy chased a tennis ball across the floor. The warmth of the scene softened something inside her, just a little, she finally said. Rafael seemed genuinely surprised. "For what?" "For helping them." His gaze shifted toward the animals. "They deserve a chance." The words carried more weight than they should have. Before Maya could ask why, one of the volunteers hurried over holding a clipboard. "Maya, we have a problem." "What happened?" The foster family for the white stray backed out. Maya's eyes widened immediately. The dog from the alley, the one she had bandaged in the rain, the one who now spent most afternoons sleeping outside her apartment building. "What do you mean they backed out?" The volunteer sighed. "They changed their minds this morning." Maya looked toward the kennel area where the dog sat watching the crowd. Alone again, unwanted again. A familiar sadness settled across her expression. Rafael noticed it instantly. He followed her gaze toward the kennel. Then he asked a question that caught her completely off guard. "What is his name?" Maya blinked. "He does not have one." Rafael looked at the dog for several seconds, long enough to make Maya wonder what he was thinking. Then he quietly said, "Maybe it is time he did." And for reasons Maya could not explain, the look that crossed Rafael Marino's face at that exact moment seemed less like a businessman observing a stray dog and more like a man remembering someone he had lost. Sunday arrived with clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made Brooklyn feel smaller, quieter, almost intimate. Maya Foster spent most of the morning cleaning kennels at the shelter, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the previous afternoon, specifically to the look on Rafael Marino's face when he had stared at the stray dog. It had not been admiration, it had not been curiosity, it had looked dangerously close to grief. By noon, the adoption event had slowed. Families came and went. Volunteers folded tables and packed away supplies. The white dog remained in his kennel near the back office, watching the world with patient brown eyes. Maya stopped beside him several times throughout the day, each time he wagged his tail. Each time she felt a little more guilty about leaving him there. "You are making this difficult," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. The dog leaned into her hand. Across the room, 2 volunteers were speaking quietly while organizing paperwork. Maya was not paying attention until she heard a familiar name. "You mean Rafael Marino?" The second volunteer immediately lowered her voice. "Keep it down." Maya looked up. Neither woman noticed. "What is the big deal?" the first asked. The second glanced around before answering. "You seriously do not know who he is?" Maya's attention sharpened instantly. She pretended to focus on the kennel while listening. "I know he is rich." The other volunteer laughed nervously. "That is one way to describe it." "Then what?" Another pause followed. "People say he owns half the city. That is impossible. Maybe. But every time his name comes up, people stop asking questions." Maya felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. She wanted to hear more. Unfortunately, the shelter director entered moments later and interrupted the conversation completely. The volunteers immediately returned to work. Maya remained kneeling beside the kennel. Her mind raced. Owns half the city. People stop asking questions. None of it sounded normal. Yet it explained certain things. The expensive vehicles, the constant respect, the way people reacted when he entered a room. Unfortunately, it explained almost nothing about why he kept appearing in her life. Late that afternoon, Maya finally finished her shift and headed home. The neighborhood glowed beneath golden sunlight. Children rode bicycles through side streets. Store owners arranged pumpkins outside their shops. Everything felt peaceful. She turned the corner toward her apartment building and stopped. The white dog sat beside the entrance, waiting. Maya blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" The dog immediately stood and trotted toward her. She looked around for a leash, an owner, anyone. Nothing, just the dog. Alone again. Maya sighed. "You cannot keep doing this." The dog wagged his tail harder. "That is not a real answer." A familiar voice spoke from behind her. "He seems to disagree." Maya turned. Raphael stood near the curb, dark coat, hands in his pockets. Calm expression. Somehow she was no longer surprised to see him. "Do you just materialize whenever I mention your name?" she asked. "That would be an unusual talent. You keep showing up." "So do you." Maya laughed despite herself. The dog moved immediately toward Raphael and sat beside him, not cautiously, not hesitantly, comfortably, as though they had known each other for years. Maya noticed the interaction instantly. "That is interesting." Raphael glanced down. "What is?" "He likes you." Raphael slowly reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear. The animal practically melted with happiness. Maya folded her arms. Most dogs need time to trust people. Perhaps he has good instincts. Perhaps. For a moment they stood together beneath the afternoon sunlight while traffic drifted past nearby. The scene felt strangely normal, strangely easy. Then Maya remembered the conversation she had overheard earlier. "Can I ask you something?" Raphael looked at her. "You usually do." The question lingered in the air. Raphael's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not fear, not anger, caution, business. Maya groaned. "That answer again." A faint smile appeared. "It remains accurate. People seem nervous when they talk about you." Maya studied him carefully. "Why?" The smile disappeared. For the first time since she had met him, silence felt heavy rather than comfortable. Cars passed. Wind stirred fallen leaves across the sidewalk. The dog sat quiet between them. Finally, Raphael looked away toward the street. Sometimes people create stories when they do not understand something. It was not really an answer. Maya knew it. Raphael knew it too. Before she could press further, a black SUV pulled slowly to the curb. The driver remained inside. Waiting, Maya watched the vehicle. Then she looked back at Raphael. Something about the moment felt different. Like standing at the edge of a door she was not supposed to open, and for the first time since they met, Maya found herself wondering whether learning the truth about Rafael Marino might be far more complicated than she was prepared for. The following Wednesday arrived wrapped in cold sunlight and a sharp wind that carried fallen leaves through the streets of Brooklyn. Maya Foster had spent the entire morning trying not to think about Rafael Marino. It was becoming increasingly difficult. Every unanswered question seemed to create 3 more. By late afternoon, she found herself standing outside a small community fundraiser for local animal shelters in Lower Manhattan. The event occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse overlooking the East River. Large windows filled the space with golden light. Volunteers moved between display tables. Donors chatted beside framed photographs of rescue animals that had found permanent homes. Maya was helping organize paperwork when she noticed a familiar figure entering the room, Rafael. He was dressed in a dark charcoal suit, his expression calm as always, yet something about him seemed different tonight. More distant, more thoughtful. Several people immediately approached him. Conversations followed, handshakes, quiet respect. Maya watched from across the room. Eventually their eyes met. Rafael crossed the floor toward her. "I should stop being surprised when you appear somewhere," Maya said. "That would save both of us time." A faint smile touched his face, perhaps. Before Maya could respond, one of the event organizer interrupted. "Mr. Marino, your office requested the presentation materials." Rafael nodded. "Thank you." The organizer handed him a leather portfolio. Rafael accepted it and stepped aside to take a phone call that had just arrived. Maya turned back toward her paperwork. Unfortunately, a gust of wind from an open balcony door caught several loose documents and scattered them across the floor. Volunteers immediately rushed to gather them. Maya bent to help. One sheet slid beneath a nearby table. She reached for it. Her fingers brushed paper that did not belong there. A photograph, old, slightly worn around the edges. Maya picked it up automatically. The image showed 2 young men standing beside a dog. One of them was unmistakably Rafael. Several years younger but still recognizable. The other looked similar enough to be family. Dark hair, similar eyes, similar smile. The dog stood proudly between them. A white dog. Maya's breath caught. Not identical to the stray she had rescued, yet remarkably similar. Before she could examine it further, a shadow fell across the table. She looked up. Rafael stood there. The phone call had ended. For the first time since she had met him, his composure cracked. Not dramatically, just enough for her to see it. His eyes settled on the photograph. Silence followed, slowly stood. "I found this." Rafael accepted the photograph carefully, as though it weighed far more than paper should. The room around them seemed to fade. Conversations became distant. Music disappeared into background noise. Maya watched him stare at the image. "Your brother?" she asked quietly. Rafael remained silent for several seconds. Then he nodded once. "Yes." It was the first truly personal answer he had ever given her. Maya felt her curiosity immediately replaced by something else. Compassion. The expression on his face said more than words ever could. "I am sorry," she said softly. Rafael looked back at the photograph. His name was Luca. The name lingered between them. Maya noticed how carefully he spoke it, how rarely he probably allowed himself to. "You were close." Again, a simple nod. Outside the windows, sunlight reflected across the river in waves of gold. Inside, Rafael continued staring at the image. "He liked helping animals," he said quietly. "More than people most days." Maya smiled faintly. For the first time all evening, Rafael almost smiled too. Almost. Then his attention returned to the photograph. "He used to bring home every stray he found." Maya looked at the dog in the image again. Suddenly something made sense. Not everything, not even close, but something. She remembered the way Rafael had watched her in the alley, the way he had looked at the dog, the sadness she had seen but could not explain until now. "That is why you noticed me," she said softly. Rafael did not answer immediately. The silence itself felt like confirmation. "Maybe," he finally said. It was not a full explanation. Yet it was the most honest thing he had ever given her. Across the room, guests continued talking and laughing, completely unaware that something important had just shifted. For the first time since they met, Maya no longer saw Rafael as a mystery wrapped in expensive suits and unanswered questions. She saw grief, real grief, the kind people carried for years, the kind that quietly followed them into every room. Unfortunately for Maya, the photograph revealed only part of the truth, because what she still did not know was why Rafael kept that particular picture closer than anything else he owned. And why the story behind the dog standing between the 2 brothers was far more important than she could possibly imagine. By the time Thursday arrived, the photograph had become impossible for Maya Foster to forget. The image lingered in her mind during morning appointments, during lunch breaks, even during the quiet moments when she sat alone in her apartment, watching the city lights appear one window at a time. She kept thinking about Luca, about the sadness she had seen in Rafael's eyes, about the strange connection between a man who seemed to possess everything and a memory he clearly could not let go of. Late that afternoon, Maya finished her shift and headed toward the shelter. The air smelled of approaching rain. Dark clouds gathered above the skyline, painting Manhattan and Brooklyn in shades of silver and blue. Inside the shelter, the familiar sounds of barking and conversation greeted her. Volunteers moved through the aisles, carrying supplies while potential adopters visited the kennels. The white stray immediately stood when he saw her. His tail wagged so hard that it slapped against the kennel door. Maya laughed softly and knelt beside him. "You are becoming spoiled." The dog pressed his nose against her hand, "and somehow I think you know it." A few minutes later she signed paperwork, helped clean feeding stations, and assisted a family interested in adopting a senior terrier. The evening moved peacefully. Then a familiar black SUV appeared outside the front entrance. Maya noticed it through the shelter window. For reasons she could not explain, she smiled before she realized she was smiling. Raphael entered moments later. Rain began tapping softly against the glass behind him. He greeted the staff politely and carried a large box of supplies toward the storage room. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Yet the atmosphere shifted the same way it always did whenever he arrived. Not because people feared him. At least not here. It was because he seemed completely out of place among the barking dogs and folding chairs, yet somehow he fit perfectly at the same time. Maya found him a few minutes later near the kennels. "You know," she said, "most people would just donate money and leave." Raphael glanced toward her. "Most people are smarter than I am." The answer caught her off guard. She laughed. "I seriously doubt that." For a moment the conversation settled into comfortable silence. Then something unexpected happened. The white stray suddenly slipped through an open kennel gate. Before any volunteer could react, the dog raced directly across the room, not toward Maya, toward Raphael. The shelter fell strangely quiet. The dog stopped in front of him and sat. Then, without hesitation, rested his head against Raphael's leg. Maya stared. Several volunteers exchanged surprised looks. Raphael froze completely. The dog remained there, calm and content, as though he had finally found someone he trusted. Maya watched Raphael carefully. Something changed in his expression. The guarded walls she always sensed around him seemed to weaken for a brief moment, not disappear, just crack. He slowly crouched beside the dog. His hand rested gently on the animal's head. The shelter noise faded into the background. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere a phone rang. Yet Raphael seemed unaware of everything except the dog in front of him. "That is unusual," Maya said quietly. Raphael nodded without looking up. Almost emotional, Maya stepped closer. "You really miss him, do not you?" Raphael knew exactly who she meant. "Luca." For several seconds he remained silent, then he finally spoke. "Every day." The honesty surprised her. No carefully constructed answer, just truth. Maya sat down on the nearby bench. "I lost my father when I was 19. Raphael looked toward her. She rarely talked about it. "Some days it feels normal," she continued softly. "Other days it feels like it happened yesterday." Raphael listened without interrupting. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the river. "People think grief gets smaller," Maya said. "I do not think it does. I think we just learn how to carry it." The words hung between them. Raphael lowered his eyes toward the dog again. For the first time since she met him, Maya felt as though she was speaking to the real man instead of the mystery surrounding him. Then the dog did something neither of them expected. He climbed onto the bench between them and curled up as if he belonged there. Maya laughed. Raphael shook his head slightly. "Looks like he made a decision." "About what?" Maya asked. Raphael glanced at the dog, then at her. "About where he wants to be." The answer sounded simple, yet something deeper moved beneath it, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Unfortunately for Maya, while she was beginning to understand the grief Raphael carried, she still had no idea how many secrets remained hidden behind the man himself. And less than 24 hours later, one small discovery would force her to question everything she thought she knew about him. The discovery happened by accident. Most important things did. 2 days after the conversation at the shelter, Maya Foster spent her Saturday morning helping unload supplies at a small community construction site on the edge of Brooklyn. The project had been struggling for months. A local non-profit wanted to convert an abandoned warehouse into a low-cost animal care center, but funding had nearly disappeared halfway through renovation. Volunteers continued showing up anyway. Hope was cheaper than concrete. The sky was bright blue. The air smelled of fresh lumber and autumn leaves. Maya carried a box of medical supplies across the unfinished floor while workers installed drywall nearby. The building was slowly beginning to resemble something real. Something permanent. Careful with those, a volunteer called. That is half our inventory. Maya laughed. Then maybe somebody should stop giving me the heavy boxes. She set the supplies down and wiped dust from her hands. That was when she noticed a plaque leaning against one of the walls. Temporary. Printed for the grand opening. Her smiled slightly as she read the inscription. The project had finally secured full funding. Anonymous. Maya frowned. Anonymous again. She had seen those words before. At the shelter. At the fundraiser. Everywhere Raphael seemed to appear. Before she could further, the non-profit director approached carrying blueprints. Can you believe it? He asked. We almost lost the entire project. Who donated? Maya asked casually. The director laughed. If I knew that, it would not be anonymous. Then his expression shifted. Although somebody from Merino Holdings handled the paperwork, Maya froze. Merino Holdings? Yeah, huge company. The director shook his head in disbelief. Whoever they are, they practically saved this place. Maya looked around the construction site again. Workers, volunteers, future examination rooms, future kennels, future surgeries that would help animals with nowhere else to go. Suddenly she understood something important. Raphael was not helping one shelter. He was helping many quietly, consistently, without publicity, without asking for recognition. The realization stayed with her all afternoon. Later that evening she stopped by the shelter. The white dog greeted her immediately, climbing onto the bench beside her as though he owned it. I think I finally figured out one of your secrets, she whispered. The dog wagged his tail. Unfortunately, you are terrible at answering questions. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the shelter volunteers. Attached was a photograph from that morning's construction site. Maya opened it, then stopped breathing for a second. Standing in the background was Raphael, not posing, not speaking, simply observing the progress from a distance. Nobody else seemed to notice him. The photograph had captured him by accident. Maya stared at the image. He looked different when he thought nobody was watching, less guarded, less powerful, almost tired. Before she could examine it longer, movement outside the shelter window caught her attention. A black SUV sat parked across the street. Maya closed her eyes and laughed softly. Of course. 20 minutes later she stepped outside. Cool evening air wrapped around the city. Streetlights flickered on one by one. The SUV remained parked at the curb. This time, instead of pretending not to notice, Maya crossed the street directly. The passenger window lowered before she reached it. Raphael sat inside. You know, Maya said, most people call before checking on someone. Raphael looked mildly amused. And most people do not walk directly towards suspicious vehicles. Maybe we are both unusual. That earned the smallest smile. Maya leaned lightly against the door. I visited the construction site today. Raphael said nothing. Merino Holdings seems very generous. Still nothing. Maya folded her arms. Why keep everything anonymous? Finally he answered. Because the work matters more than the credit. The response sounded simple. Yet Maya believed him completely. For the first time since meeting him, she realized she was no longer searching for reasons to distrust him. She was searching for reasons not to admire him. The problem was that she was running out of them. Their conversation lasted only a few minutes before Raphael was called. Business, meetings, responsibilities, the mysterious world he never fully explained. As the SUV disappeared into evening traffic, Maya found herself smiling without realizing it. Unfortunately for her, the next discovery would be far more difficult to ignore, because less than 24 hours later, while helping organize donation records at the shelter, she would uncover evidence that Raphael Merino visited the same cemetery every single week. And whatever waited there mattered enough for him to keep returning year after year. Sunday afternoon arrived beneath a sky painted with soft grey clouds and drifting sunlight. The city seemed quieter than usual. Traffic moved slower. Storefront windows reflected pale autumn colors. Maya Foster stood inside the shelter office organizing donation records while the white dog slept beneath her desk. The task was simple: receipts, volunteer forms, community outreach paperwork. Nothing that should have changed her day. Then she noticed a familiar name, Merino Holdings. The company appeared throughout the records. Donations, supplies, renovation grants, medical equipment. The deeper she looked, the more often the name surfaced. Yet one detail caught her attention above everything else: a delivery receipt attached to a floral order, weekly, same cemetery, same section, same gravesite number, every Sunday for nearly 5 years. Maya stared at the paperwork. 5 years, every week. No missed dates, no interruptions. The consistency felt less like a habit and more like a promise. Outside the office window, volunteers laughed while preparing kennels for the evening. Inside, Maya found herself thinking about Raphael again, about grief, about loyalty. About all the things he never said out loud. By late afternoon, curiosity finally won. The cemetery sat on a quiet hillside overlooking the East River. Large oak trees lined the entrance. Fallen leaves covered the pathways like scattered gold. Maya parked across the street and immediately felt guilty for coming. This was personal, private. Yet something told her she needed to understand. She followed the winding paths until she spotted a familiar black SUV parked beneath a row of trees. Her pulse quickened. Raphael stood several yards away. Alone, no bodyguards, no meetings, no phone calls, just silence. Maya remained partially hidden behind a stone monument, uncertain whether she should leave. Then Raphael turned slightly, not enough to see her, enough for her to see him. The expression on his face stopped her completely. She had seen powerful men, wealthy men, confident men. This was none of those things. This was simply a brother standing beside someone he missed. The wind stirred through the trees. Raphael placed fresh flowers against a headstone and remained there quietly. Minutes passed. He never looked at his phone, never checked the time, just stood there. Eventually Maya realized she should leave. This was not her moment. She turned carefully and began walking away. Unfortunately, she never noticed the loose gravel beneath her shoe. The sound echoed louder than it. Raphael looked up immediately. Their eyes met across the cemetery. Maya froze. There was no point pretending. She stepped forward awkwardly. "I can explain." To her surprise, Raphael almost smiled. "Can you?" Maya sighed. "Probably not." For a moment neither moved. Then Raphael gestured toward the path. "Walk with me." They followed the tree-lined trail overlooking the river. The late afternoon light painted everything gold. Neither spoke immediately. Finally Maya broke the silence. "I found the records. I assumed you might. You come every week." "Yes, for 5 years." Another nod. Maya glanced toward him. Raphael looked toward the water. "Not long enough." The answer carried enough sadness to silence her. Several moments passed before he spoke again. "People tell you grief fades." Maya recognized the subject immediately. "Does it?" Raphael considered the question. "No, you simply learn how to carry it without letting it crush everything else." Maya remembered saying something similar days earlier at the shelter. Hearing the words from him felt different somehow, more personal, more earned. They reached a bench overlooking the river and sat. Boats moved slowly across the water below. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. For the first time since meeting him, Raphael seemed completely unguarded. "Luca used to believe every broken thing deserved another chance," he said quietly. Maya listened. "Animals, people, everyone." A faint smile touched his face. "It drove me crazy." Maya laughed softly. "You loved him more than anyone." The honesty settled gently between them. Then Raphael reached into his coat pocket and removed something folded and worn, a newspaper clipping. He stared at it for several seconds before handing it to her. Maya unfolded the paper carefully. The article was years old. The details had faded. But one thing remained clear. It mentioned Luca, and beneath the headline was a photograph. Maya's breath caught. Standing beside Luca was a white dog, almost identical to the one sleeping outside her apartment building. She looked up in surprise. Raphael's gaze remained fixed on the river. "Some memories never stop following you," he said quietly. Maya stared at the photograph again. The resemblance was impossible to ignore, and for the first time she began to suspect that the connection between Raphael Luca and the dog she rescued was much deeper than anyone had allowed her to see. The article appeared on a Tuesday night. Maya Foster was sitting on the floor of her apartment surrounded by shelter paperwork, while the white dog slept beside the couch. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A half-finished cup of tea cooled on the coffee table. Ordinary. Then her phone vibrated. One message from a volunteer friend, no explanation, just a link. Maya opened it absent-mindedly. The moment she saw the headline, her stomach dropped. The article was not new. It had been published several years earlier by an investigative magazine. At the center of the story stood a familiar photograph. Rafael Marino. The image showed him exiting a downtown building surrounded by security personnel. Beneath it, a single phrase appeared repeatedly throughout the article. Organized crime connections. Maya stared at the screen. Once, twice, 3 times. Her pulse quickened with every paragraph. Allegations, rumors, business networks, influence stretching across multiple industries. Nothing in the article described crimes directly. Nothing proved anything conclusively. Yet the message was clear. Rafael Marino was not simply a wealthy businessman. According to everything she was reading, he was one of the most powerful figures in a world she knew nothing about. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. The dog lifted his head briefly before settling back down. Her mind replayed every conversation, every unexplained appearance, every black SUV, every carefully avoided answer. Suddenly the missing pieces began fitting together. The influence, the secrecy, the way people reacted when they heard his name. The way conversations stopped whenever he entered a room. She closed the article and immediately opened another, then another. The results were impossible to ignore. Some described him as a philanthropist. Others described him as a businessman. A few used Dar completely, yet every story shared one thing in common. Rafael Marino inspired fear and respect in equal measure. Maya set the phone down. The room suddenly felt smaller, more complicated. Because the problem was not what she had learned. The problem was that none of it matched the man she knew. The man she knew donated anonymously to shelters. The man she knew visited his brother's grave every week. The man she knew carried grief behind his eyes and treated animals with unexpected kindness. Neither version seemed entirely real. Unfortunately for Maya, both were. The following evening Rafael called. It was the first time he had ever called directly. Maya stared at it until the ringing stopped. A minute later, it started again. This time she answered, "Hello." Silence lingered briefly. Then came his voice. Calm, familiar. "You sound upset." Maya almost laughed. "That is one way to describe it." Another pause. "You found something." It was not a question. Maya stood and walked toward the window. Rain blurred the city lights below. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked quietly. Raphael understood immediately. "Tell you what?" "Who you are." The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Raphael spoke. "Because most people decide who I am before they know me." Maya closed her eyes. "And was I supposed to discover it from old articles?" "No." For the first time she heard something unfamiliar in his voice. Regret, real regret. "Then when?" Raphael did not answer. That hurt more than she expected. Maya rested one hand against the cold glass. "I kept asking you questions. I know. And every time you gave me half an answer, I know." The honesty only made it worse. She wanted excuses, arguments, denials. Instead, Raphael gave her truth. Quiet and unavoidable. "Everything between us was real," he said. Maya swallowed hard. "You do not get to decide." That followed. Heavy, painful, necessary. Down on the street, headlights reflected across wet pavement. The city moved on while her world shifted beneath her feet. Maya. She had never heard him say her name that way before. Not carefully, not like something fragile. "I never wanted to lie to you." "But you did." Raphael said nothing, because there was no defense against the truth. Minutes later, the call ended. No shouting, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. Maya placed the phone on the counter and stood alone in her apartment while rain washed across the city outside. The white dog wandered over and rested beside her feet. She looked down at him and felt her chest tighten. Because for the first time since meeting Rafael Marino, she did not know what to believe. Unfortunately for her, the answers she wanted were finally coming. And once Raphael revealed the real reason he had followed her all those weeks ago, neither of their lives would ever look the same again. 3 days passed before Maya Foster saw Rafael Marino again. 3 long days filled with unanswered questions, restless nights, and conversations she replayed over and over in her mind. The distance should have made things easier. It did not. If anything, it made everything worse. Because the more she tried to separate the articles from the man she knew, the more impossible it became. On Friday evening, the shelter closed early due to a storm moving across the city. Most volunteers had already left. The white dog slept near the front desk while rain streaked across the windows in silver lines. Maya was locking a filing cabinet when the front door opened. She did not need to look up to know who it was. The room changed whenever Raphael entered, not because of fear, not anymore, because of everything left unsaid between them. He stopped several feet away. Neither spoke immediately. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the river. "Thank you for coming," Maya finally said. Raphael nodded once. "Thank you for staying." The simplicity of the exchange somehow hurt more than an argument would have. Maya folded her arms. "You said there was something I needed to know." Raphael looked toward the sleeping dog. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he walked toward one of the empty benches near the window. Maya followed. The storm darkened the sky outside, turning the shelter lights warm and golden by comparison. "Do you remember?" Raphael asked quietly. "The one with Luca and the dog?" Maya nodded. "Yes." Raphael rested his hands together. His gaze remained fixed on the rain. "That dog was named Benny." The name felt strangely important. Maya listened carefully. "Luca found him on the side of a road years ago, injured. Alone, nobody wanted him. A faint smile appeared and disappeared. So naturally, my brother brought him home. Maya could almost picture it. Luca arriving with a stray amount of optimism. They became inseparable, Raphael continued. Wherever Luca went, Benny followed. The shelter seemed unusually quiet. Even the dog sleeping nearby had not moved. After Luca died, Benny stopped eating for weeks. Grief was painful enough in people. Somehow it felt even sadder in animals. Eventually he recovered, Raphael said, but he was never the same. Maya studied his expression. The sadness was there again, like something he carried every day. "What happened to Benny?" she asked softly. Raphael finally looked at her. He disappeared. The answer surprised her. Disappeared. One day he was gone. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Raphael glanced toward the white dog sleeping near the desk. Years passed. Maya followed his gaze. Suddenly her heartbeat quickened. The resemblance, the photograph, the strange way Raphael reacted whenever he saw the dog. Pieces began fitting together. Raphael was silent for several seconds. Then he nodded. "I know how impossible it sounds." Maya looked at the dog again. White fur, brown eyes, familiar markings. The age seemed right. Everything seemed right. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked. "Because it sounds ridiculous." "No." Maya shook her head gently. "It sounds important." The answer caught him off guard. She could see it immediately. For a moment neither spoke. Then Raphael finally revealed the truth he had been carrying since the beginning. "The night I saw you in that alley, I was not looking at you." Maya blinked. "What?" "Not at first." His voice remained calm, honest. "I saw the dog." Maya stared at him. Raphael continued. "Then I saw you kneeling in the rain helping him." The memory seemed vivid even now. "You stayed when nobody else would." Maya felt her throat tighten. "So you followed me because of the dog?" Raphael nodded slowly. "At first." The honesty left no room for misunderstanding. "I wanted to know who would stop their life for a wounded stray." Rain hammered harder against the glass. The city disappeared behind sheets of silver water. "And then?" Maya asked quietly. Raphael looked directly at her. For the first time there were no half answers, no carefully constructed walls. "Then I kept finding reasons not to stop." The words settled gently between them. Not a confession, not quite, something deeper, something more real. Maya lowered her eyes. Every mystery suddenly made sense. The alley, the clinic, the donations, the questions, the attention. None of it had begun because of power or obsession or manipulation. It had begun because a man carrying years of grief had witnessed an act of kindness he thought no longer existed. Unfortunately for Maya, understanding the truth did not answer the most important question of all, because now she finally knew why Raphael had followed her. What she still did not know was whether she could find a place for him in her future. Spring arrived quietly. The city traded grey skies for clear mornings. Trees along the sidewalks filled with new leaves. Storefront windows stood open again. People lingered outside coffee shops instead of rushing past them. Life moved forward the way it always did, one day at a time. 3 months after the stormy evening at the shelter, Maya Foster stood outside a newly renovated building on the edge of Brooklyn. Bright banners fluttered in the breeze. Volunteers arranged flowers near the entrance. Families gathered along the sidewalk. The old warehouse was gone. In its place stood a fully functioning animal rescue center, examination rooms, recovery spaces, adoption offices. Everything the neighborhood had needed for years. Sunlight poured across the building's glass front doors. Maya looked up at the sign and smiled. For the first time in a very long time, she felt something she had almost forgotten was possible. Certainty. Not certainty about the future. Nobody ever received self. About where she belonged. About the life she wanted to build. Behind her, familiar footsteps approached. She did not need to turn around. "You are late," she said. 32 seconds. Rafael Marino stopped beside her. Maya laughed softly. Some things had changed during the past 3 months. Some things had not. Rafael still noticed details nobody else noticed. He still carried grief. He still visited Luca every Sunday. But he had changed too. Not because Maya asked him to, because he chose to. The walls around him no longer seemed quite so high. The distance no longer seemed quite so permanent. He looked at the rescue center and quietly shook his head. Luca would have loved this place. Maya glanced toward him. "I think so too." The words settled gently between them. No sadness, no pain, just memory, the kind that no longer felt heavy. Guests continued arriving. Volunteers carried supplies through the front entrance. Children laughed somewhere across the parking lot. The morning felt bright and alive. A second later, a familiar white blur raced across the sidewalk. The dog, the same dog that had started everything. Whether he was truly Benny or not no longer mattered as much as it once had. Some mysteries did not need perfect answers. He had found a home, that was enough. The dog stopped between Maya and Raphael before dropping dramatically onto the grass beneath the sunlight. Maya smiled, still spoiled. Completely spoiled, Raphael agreed. The ceremony began shortly afterward. Community leaders spoke. Volunteers received recognition. Donors were thanked. Maya noticed something interesting during the entire event. Raphael never stepped onto the stage, never accepted attention, never allowed anyone to focus on him. The center belonged to the people who built it, not the people who funded it. Later, when the crowd finally dispersed, Maya found herself sitting on the front steps beneath the warm spring sun. The rescue center buzzed quietly behind her. Raphael joined her a moment later. Neither spoke immediately. They simply sat there together while the city moved around them. Comfortable silence, the rarest kind. The dog wandered over and curled up directly between them. Maya looked down and smiled. The image felt strangely familiar. Then she remembered. Rain and Alley. A wounded stray dog. A woman kneeling on wet pavement while the rest of the city walked past. It felt like another lifetime, Raphael asked. Maya watched the dog sleeping peacefully in the sunlight. How strange life is, Raphael nodded. That seems accurate. She turned toward him. You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were probably trouble. Probably, Maya laughed. Definitely, that is fair. For a moment they simply looked at each other. No secrets remained, no mysteries remained, no questions remained unanswered. Just two people who had found something neither expected: understanding, trust, home. Raphael reached for her hand, not dramatically, not cautiously, naturally, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Maya held on. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and spring flowers through the air. Around them the rescue center opened its doors for the very first time, a place built from kindness, from second chances, from people who believed broken things deserved another contentedly, and stretched across the warm concrete between them. Sunlight reflected in the windows behind. No rain, no loneliness, no shadows. Only a quiet morning and the life waiting ahead. Because the night Raphael thought he was following Maya Foster home, he never realized the truth. She was leading him back to the part of himself he thought he had lost forever.